My name is Kobe Kushner. I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud, and today we're talking about lithium. With us is Steve Hansen. He's the president and CEO of ACME Lithium. Before he takes the reins, allow me to discuss what's been going on in the sector. I think the elephant in the room is that Goldman Sachs report that came out last week calling for a large lithium oversupply. After that report, we saw lithium stocks tumble somewhere between 10 and 15%. But the sell-off has now cooled as lithium prices have now started to tick back up. We've seen some rebuttals to the Goldman report. Benchmark Mineral Intelligence says that the industry can't rely on Chinese feedstock to meet the market. And we generally agree here. Chinese hard rock sources tend to be of lower quality than what we see in Canada and Australia. Much of their supply is from lepidolite, and that's a secondary source of hard rock lithium next to spodumene. These sources tend to be lower grade, and because of the mica content, it can make metallurgy more difficult and costly. Metallurgy is key, as battery-grade lithium requires a high purity concentrate. And we're not just talking grade here, we also need very low levels of impurities in order for the product to be suitable for EVs. We at Red Cloud are hesitant to call for an oversupply given the uncertainty on the demand side. Supply forecasts haven't really moved that much and have been stable around 630 tons of LCE for 2022, but demand forecasts have really fluctuated above and below this number, give or take 10,000 tons. And the demand side is what we ought to be paying more attention to. After all, China had some pretty restricted COVID lockdowns earlier this year and are only now starting to reopen. So bottom line, if there is an oversupply this year, we don't expect it to be too significant, and will most likely be under 6,000 tons, which is well below the oversupply levels that we saw in 2019 of about 80,000. Whether or not short-term oversupply even has a major impact on the battery-grade lithium prices is another question on its own. We do expect the deficit to return in 2024 after all, and continue to worsen going forward. New mines do have a tendency to come online much slower than anticipated. And I do dive into this topic quite a bit more on our latest episode of the Red Cloud Research Roundup podcast. So just search Red Cloud Research Roundup on whatever platform you use to get your podcast from. But for now, I think I've gone on long enough. So during today's webinar, Steve is going to provide us with an overview and an outlook. And when he's done, the presentation will move on to the Q&A session, and a reminder that you can type your questions into the comment box at any time. But as always, we do have to run through the fine print. So during today's webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined in the company's corporate deck, which we will see in a moment. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on ACME Lithium. And with that, I will now turn it over to you, Steve.
Great. Well, thanks, Kobe, for that introduction, and a pleasure to be here today. Thanks to the Red Cloud team for putting this together. And welcome those that have joined this webinar. Again, pleased to be here today. Again, my name is Steve Hansen. I'm the president and CEO of ACME, and I'm actually the founder as well. I've been in the resource sector and financial markets for close to 30 years, and I've worked on all four continents on a variety of interesting projects. And in particular, I founded ACME Lithium on the basis of really a mega trend that we're going to see here for battery metals over the next decade or so. We trade on the CSE under ACME and on the OTCQB and as well. Again, our forward-looking statements and safe harbor, the lawyers asked me to put this in, so feel free to check out our presentation on our website and you can read this. In founding ACME, lithium had taken a bit of softness about 2 years ago. I had the opportunity to purchase a project in Nevada during this time, and that really was the basis for founding ACME Lithium. And in particular, really this trend and supply demand issue that we were facing with lithium meant that we were already in the right market for this commodity. We now have 4 projects in North America, 2 in Manitoba and 2 in Nevada. So again, the right address to domestically supply lithium to this market, which really has become a crisis. And then I've had a track record of assembling smart, capable people who have developed projects like this around the world. So again, we've got the right market right now, the right address for our projects, and the right people to advance our company. So, some of the drivers that really are themes that have happened recently that continue to make this really interesting from a critical minerals and lithium standpoint. Kobe covered off some of those items. I think there is going to be a perpetual deficit facing as we see EV demand increase, grid storage increase. And of course, we use lithium in our cell phones and our tablets and laptops and power tools and various other things on a regular basis. Again, lithium demand is going to continue to decrease and supply isn't going to keep up. The U.S. government as well has been calling this a crisis when it comes to critical minerals and lithium domestic sources, that is. There was a white paper done by the Energy Department back in June of last year, about a year ago, and it really called this a crisis, and a number of things really were needed to be done at a government level to make sure that these projects get funded and ultimately get permitted down the ride. So, and most recently, the Defense Production Act was invoked by Biden to ramp up domestic mining and secure lithium supply chain. Trudeau followed and now has a mineral strategy where they will be investing a couple $1 billion into this sector to make sure these projects in Canada move forward. So huge tailwind coming from the government. They're saying the right things. Let's hope that they actually act at the level, the ground level, and making sure that some of these projects around North America are greenlit. And then obviously demand is continuing. We're going to see huge investment continuing into this sector, and we don't see that slowing down whatsoever. So again, many of you may not know, but lithium is really only found in a handful of countries around the world. And most of it is produced in only a handful of countries, including China, Australia, Chile, Argentina. And then the US and Canada really are just a sliver of the domestic production and supply of lithium, yet are some of the largest users in the world. So again, a huge need for the US and Canada to get a domestic supply going. From a national security and economic security standpoint, we can't rely on foreign supplies to drive this massive EV market that is growing rapidly every year. As a result of a lack of supply, we've seen huge price increases in this last year, almost 500% in the price of the commodity. Again, I think we're going to continue to see demand, as mentioned previously in this presentation. And although we may see a little bit of volatility in lithium prices, all the industry experts out there certainly aren't seeing that we're going to see this price coming crashing down. There continues to be commodity traders, strategics, mining companies, and governments around the world that are scrambling to find good sources of lithium. And obviously at ACME, we hope to be one of those down the road. So we started with one project in Nevada, that was Fish Lake Valley. We quickly expanded and added a second project in Clayton Valley, Nevada, which really is one of the epicenters of lithium development in North America. And then I started researching the central area of Canada, in particular in the southeast area of Manitoba. Really interesting area for lithium, found in pegmatite fields in hard rock. There's an existing lithium, cesium, and tantalum mine in this region. So again, we secured 2 projects in Manitoba, which I'm really excited about, and we're about to begin exploration here very soon. So moving back to Nevada, as you see in the southwestern area of the state, this is where Clayton Valley is located. It's about halfway between Reno and Las Vegas. Nevada has a long history as a mining jurisdiction. It's recently been voted the #1 mining jurisdiction in the world. You can work there year round. Again, great infrastructure, lots of talent. And so it's a great place for us to have 2 of our projects. Obviously, Tesla's Gigafactory is located there. We've got some good neighbors. The only existing lithium production in the U.S. comes from Albemarle, a New York Stock Exchange company in Clayton Valley. We're a neighbor of theirs. We're contiguous to them to the northwest. And then obviously, one of the world-class projects is in northern Nevada by Lithium Americas. Schlumberger and Panasonic are building a pilot plant next to us to process their lithium brine. So a lot of activity in the region. So we've got great addresses here with our two projects at Clayton Valley and Fish Lake Valley. So as mentioned, we have two projects. Clayton Valley is next to Albemarle's project. You'll see here on the right-hand side. And then Fish Lake Valley is just over the foothills, which is our second project here. Our really flagship project in Nevada is in Clayton Valley. Albemarle's Silver Peak project has been in production for lithium since 1966 and is the only lithium producer in the United States. We are their neighbor to the northwest. We were very fortunate to acquire this project under option last year. It had been held by a private owner for close to a decade. And we're advancing this project rapidly over the next few months. And I'm pleased to announce, after 2 phases of geophysics, we started drilling on this project last weekend. I made that announcement on Monday. So we're targeting a lithium brine target here. We're drilling as we speak and very excited about getting results out down the road to our shareholders and potential investors. So as I mentioned, we did 2 phases of geophysics at Clayton Valley. We had multiple targets here. We've announced a 3-hole drill program here up to 500 meters. What's interesting about brine, and some of you may not be aware, it's very different than hard rock. Drilling in brine, when you're drilling through brine in gravels or drilling into an aquifer, it's much akin to drilling a geothermal well or even oil and gas. It's not the same as drilling into hard rock. So you actually can make a discovery on fewer holes. You're looking at really the grade of lithium that's in the brine. You're looking at pressure from the water source. There's a number of factors that go in determining whether or not you have an economic resource. So from a CapEx standpoint, drilling for brine tends to be less than drilling in hard rock, where you have to put many, many more holes into the ground. So again, we started our first hole here. Drilling started last Saturday. I made the announcement on Monday before the market, and we're really excited about potentially future results down the road here at Clayton Valley. Our second project is over the foothills to the west of Clayton Valley. We're seeing more activity happening here in the red. This was our first acquisition at FLV1, and then we expanded the project into FLV2. There's been some historical geophysics done here with multiple targets, and then we've had some verifications of lithium on surface through some sampling, up to 600 ppm here. So, moderately positive results. We think this is a really interesting project. We're going to do a little more exploration work here. In fact, my geo just visited the property here in the last few days. So we're evaluating this project, probably going to do a little more geophysics here in the summer, and then I'll be making a drilling decision at Fish Lake Valley here sometime towards the end of the summer, and potentially drilling here in the fall. We believe this is a clay project. Again, in a highly prospective region, there's more activity happening here. And again, it's the valley over from Clayton Valley. So we're excited about the prospects here at Fish Lake Valley. So in researching projects around the world, my team had done a lot of extensive work in looking through the Western United States, in Canada and abroad. And we ultimately focused in on southeastern Manitoba. And in particular, we found that there was an existing lithium, tantalum, and cesium mine called the LCT elements. And in fact, it was called the Tanko mine. And it has been off and on in production since 1969 and is in fact the only lithium, cesium, and tantalum mine in Canada. It was bought by a very large Chinese company a few years ago called Sino Mine. So it's being operated and run by a Chinese company. They're expanding operations and currently producing ore on site. So this allowed us really to try to understand what was happening in the rest of the region there. So we did a full analysis of mapping and geology and looking through historical records in this area. And we ultimately, this led us to securing a fairly large claim package south of the Tanko mine. You'll see here the Tanko mine in the upper central area. In red is ACME's project claims called SHATFORD Lake. The distance here is very close. We're about 1.5 kilometers away from the Tanko mine. And although there hadn't been a lot of exploration work previously done in this southern region, we do think it's highly prospective with pegmatite fields throughout this region. We have an extensive exploration program starting here shortly. We're just waiting for a bit of the wetness and water to subside here and get boots on the ground. So I expect to have a major soil and till sampling program starting here in about 3 weeks' time. We've got some geophysics, some airborne geophysics starting here around the 3rd week of June as well in parallel. So we'll be analyzing this project over the course of the summer, developing some drill targets. And our goal, depending upon permitting and results, our goal here is to have a major drill program at SHATFORD Lake sometime mid-fall 2022. So again, lots of interesting things happening in this region. A lot of activity from other juniors in the area. I think this is going to be a major area play with multiple discoveries made. And so really excited about what's happening in Manitoba. You know, we're about 2 hours from Winnipeg by highway. There's a long history of activity of mining in the region, and then obviously in Northern Ontario. So, you know, good access to team members, crews, service providers in the area. So again, a comfortable place for us to be working and setting up shop. And then to the north of the Tanko mine, we have another project in southeast Manitoba. This is about 20 kilometers north. We call it our Cat Euclid Lake project. Again, massive pegmatite fields through this region. There's been some discoveries made and some great drill holes by a couple other companies. Recently, Australia's Mineral Resources Limited, a $8 billion company out of Australia, and I believe the 6th largest producer of lithium in the world, has recently invested in the area in another company. A lot of activity going to happen here over the next couple of years. I believe there'll be multiple discoveries made. We in parallel to our SHATFORD Lake project, will begin soil and till sampling here at Cat Euclid Lake as well. We'll be doing some airborne geophysics and then leading up to a drill program in fall. So we will work both of these projects in parallel at the same time. And again, excited about the prospects here as we move forward in Manitoba. So, you know, I founded this company not that long ago, 1.5 years ago. And so we've had our running shoes on. We've been very, very busy in putting this portfolio together. I believe it's one of the best lithium portfolios for a company that you'll see out there. We've divided in risk in multiple projects, obviously, and hoping to make a discovery. Again, my goal in my first year was to acquire 2 projects. We have 4. We went public in May of 2021, so just over a year now that we've been public. And in my first few months of being public, I raised approximately $5 million, which allowed us to do some of this initial work, completing 2 phases of geophysics in Nevada and then a sampling program at Fish Lake Valley. Again, Manitoba was secured in mid-fall. And so really the milestones that we want to achieve for Manitoba are going to be in 2020, 2022. So leading into 2022, you know, I'm always about meeting milestones or exceeding them. We've expanded our board this year and formed a new advisory board of some very good technical people. We're expanding our team of geologists and consultants and people that can work with us and bring expertise in Canada and the US to our projects. And I've raised an additional almost $9 million so far in 2022 in what has been a challenging market. Obviously, it's been fairly volatile with some of the macro factors that have been happening throughout the world. But I think there is capital that are going to the right companies and the right projects. And as a result, I have just under $12 million in working capital currently that I can deploy in our projects. So we're in really good shape from a cash standpoint. Obviously, Red Cloud has been a supporter of ours, and then we have some strategic investors, including Lithium Royalty Corporation, Wartaw Capital Advisors, and a number of other funds that have invested in us and believe in our team, and most importantly, believe in our projects. So we'll deploy capital. We're obviously drilling in Clayton Valley right now, and that's part of that program. We'll advance our project at Fish Lake Valley. And then obviously a huge program happening in Manitoba with early exploration through the summer period, and then ultimately a drill program in fall. And we'll complete all this work and still have cash left over. So again, we're in good shape to meet these milestones over the coming year, and really excited to deliver on them. And hopefully we'll have some positive results going forward. Again, our team here, briefly, I've had 30 years in the financial markets. I've been a CEO of a number of companies. I've been on boards and I've been advisor to boards. I've worked on all 4 continents around the world, from Mongolia to Africa to South America and everywhere in between. I've worked in mining and alternative energy and oil and gas as well. And really, I have a strong background in aligning corporate milestones with capital markets milestones, ensuring that companies have balance sheets and enough capital to build their business and ultimately de-risk it. I'm strong in bringing in strategics and M&A activity as well, and ultimately creating exit strategies for shareholders. And I'm used to working with teams in some exotic places and some difficult places. So I understand the challenges of working on projects like ours. I do believe that domestically, having projects in Canada and the US gives us a huge advantage. You know, we're not in a jungle, we're not on the top of a mountain, we're not in the Arctic. We're in good shape. We've got access to people and infrastructure. One of my directors, Yanis Titsos, was with BHP for 19 years. He was involved in over 300 transactions. And then Bill Firebend is my U.S. geologist that has been working in lithium and other critical minerals in the southern U.S. for close to a decade. Again, he's been spearheading a lot of our work down there as we advance Clayton Valley and Fish Lake Valley. And then our new advisory board we formed, Matt Banta is a hydrogeologist, and that's really important when you're drilling brine. Again, understanding chemistry, aquifers, water, those kind of things are really important when it comes to drilling a brine project. So we've got a brine project in Clayton Valley, a clay project in Fish Lake Valley, and then 2 hard rock projects in Manitoba. Paul McQuiggan has been leading a lot of our analysis of our work in Manitoba. He's a veteran of working on these types of projects and has been a great advisor to me. And we continue to add these types of quality people to our team as we grow our business. So again, in summary, again, huge macro opportunity here as we consider to see the battery and electric EV sectors grow. We've got multiple projects in North America, so we're well aligned. I think this is probably one of the best portfolios of projects that you will come across. These targets are drill ready. We're drilling now in Clayton Valley, and we'll be drilling again on other projects this year. At least that's our aim. And so again, hopefully we'll have steady news over the course of this year and positive news for our shareholders. We've got an experienced management team, and we're well funded. Again, we've got close to $12 million in our bank from institutions as well as high net worth investors and people that are patient and want to see us deliver over time. And we'll continue to attract capital with webinars like this and other meetings that we'll be doing with strategics and institutions as we grow our business. So again, appreciate the time today and allowing me to present ACME Lithium. And I guess now we can open up to questions. As mentioned, we're listed on the CSE and the US OTCQB. And feel free to reach out to me directly if you'd like, or go to visit our website if you want additional information. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve, for the very informative presentation. And as you said, we'll start the Q&A portion of this webinar. And reminder again that everyone on the line, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So let's start from the top here and work our way down. Steve, do you have a take on all these reports going around about, lithium supply?
We try to read as many as we can. Obviously we're running a business as well, but I do want to read, keep an eye on the macro themes. I've talked to a number of the agencies as well that are independent. in our view, as much as Goldman came out with that report and a worry that we're going to have oversupply, I'm not convinced of that. I believe that we're going to continue to see absolutely massive demand. Actually, my biggest concern is that we may see the auto manufacturers come out and say they're not going to meet their automobile targets because of lack of critical minerals. I'm concerned that we're going to see countries like Chile, Argentina, Australia, and China start to not export some of these critical minerals to countries like Canada and the US. I think there's, as demand continues to increase, I think there could be, maybe hoarding is the wrong word, but I think that there could be controls being made by countries that have supply for their own domestic needs or priority countries that are trade partners. So, if you think about what's happening between China and possibly Canada and the US, and China's processing the majority of lithium in the world right now, there are huge concerns that we will not see supplies getting to the domestic market. So, as battery factories are built, there's been announcements of new battery factories being built in Canada. There's a number of new battery factories being built in the US. The question will be is where do we get those core commodities? And so I think there are some very concerning potential macro themes out there that could affect this oversupply that Goldman talks about. I'm not convinced that I think demand is going to absolutely increase over time, and I think we're going to have supply issues. I think many of the new producers coming online are going to absolutely, as you mentioned, Kobe, take longer to be greenlit. There is a bottleneck at the end permitting process. I'm hoping that governments will put more resources into that, more people, more administrative people, more examiners, more capital. I'm hoping that the permitting bottlenecks improve over time. But these things, much like a lot of government agencies, they are bureaucratic and they tend to move a little slower. So with that being said, I think we're going to continue to see massive amounts of capital flowing into our sector. And I think we're going to continue to see a very robust lithium price.
Right. And yeah, you brought up an interesting point there that I didn't really touch on, which is the potential concerns of domestic supply issues. The increased nationalization, if we want to compare this current rally to the one that we saw in 2017, right? That's something new. It's always been there, but I think it's new this time around.
Well, and I think we're going to have some, like most commodities, you're going to have some movement. Lithium's had an incredible run. Even if we have pullbacks here, the pricing is still very robust to make, many projects extremely well economically. So we may see 4 steps forward, 1 step back, but I think ultimately it'll always be continuing to move forward from a demand, supply, and pricing standpoint.
And we'll get back to this to the macro part in a bit and talk about pricing, but we have a question here. Is ACME an acronym for something? And what's the meaning behind the name here?
Well, interesting question. ACME is kind of a generic name, and there's a funny history to it in that our first project was in the desert, and ACME can be referenced obviously to a very old Warner Brothers cartoon with the coyote and the Roadrunner. And ACME was a futuristic company that built new technologies. And so because we're in the desert, and obviously lithium and battery metals are about the future and about new technology and so forth, there is a reference to that as well. But it was a generic name that we come up with, and that's sort of the history on it.
Okay. And so when you founded the company, you timed it pretty well. Were you wanting to just start a lithium company for a while now, and the opportunity to acquire some properties just happened to come up? Or did you purposely time this? Maybe you had a hunch that prices were going to explode and now's the time to get in.
Well, I had actually had sold a company to one of Robert Friedland's companies a number of years ago, and I actually worked out of Ivanhoe Mines' office for a couple of years as an independent. I've been involved in a number of M&A transactions over my career, and down the hall from me was a company called Western Lithium. I was an early investor in that company, and that project was at that time called Thacker Pass, which is now Lithium Americas. And I actually had invested in a couple of Argentina lithium companies 10 to 12 years ago. So I'd followed the lithium sector very shortly. A couple of years ago, we saw a bit of a downturn in the lithium market. There was a bit of softness in it. And we see these kind of moments where you see peaks and slightly downward blips or valleys, and I saw an opportunity at that time that, maybe it was time to form a lithium company and go after some projects. And so, and really what happened is a colleague had offered me Fish Lake Valley as a potential project, and it was my first purchase. And then I put my running shoes on, and we've been busy ever since. We've been a very, very busy first year. I believe in lithium as a commodity, and again, excited about what we can do here in building our business at ACME Lithium.
And are you surprised by this rally? Did you imagine prices were going to explode as much as they did?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. I certainly felt that all the macro numbers on the demand side were going to be there. Ford was investing $20 billion in their EV division. General Motors was wanting to have 50% of their vehicles EV by a certain date. California has a mandate to have a certain number of electric vehicles on the road by a certain date. Everything was suggesting that we were going to have this massive need for critical minerals. You obviously see the growth in Tesla and some of the other new EV companies that are coming out. And I really think actually battery storage is one of the largest markets that isn't talked about by the media and by the investment community. I think that's actually a massive area where we're going to need battery storage for grid and for alternative energy as well. And so I saw a macro theme there and was interested in starting a company and hopefully acquiring world-class projects. And I think we've done that. And then now really it's about continuing to attract the investment community and having the capital to advance these projects, which we've done in our first year. We're in good shape in that regard.
Right. And, getting to the projects now, you have the full spectrum here. You got brines, you got clays, and you got hard rock. And there's not many other juniors that focus on all three. In fact, I can only think of one other one. So I guess, why is it significant to have all three? And generally, why do you think juniors have avoided exploring all three at once?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly there's very few brine projects in North America that are being pursued, and partly because there really aren't that many regions where you find brine. You'll see some stuff being pursued in the Salton Sea in California, possibly in Utah, and then obviously in Clayton Valley, Nevada. Clays have their challenges from a metallurgy standpoint as well. Again, there's some world-class clay projects that are in development, and not to take anything away from them, but there's certainly challenges, in clay projects. I didn't go about and say, listen, we're going to be a pure brine developer or a pure hard rock developer. Ours was about looking at areas where there had been historical mining. There's only a handful of those places in North America, and we're surrounding them. I wanted to see where there'd been a history of discovery. And again, we were able to secure world-class projects. I do believe that we, as a technical team, have to treat these very differently. My team working in Nevada on the brine project are very different than the team that's working in Manitoba. As a small company, we have not many staff. We have some good consultants. We are adding to that. But again, the expertise that I'm bringing into Manitoba for pegmatite fields and lithium and hard rock are different than the group that are understanding brine and how that's developed. I actually believe the expertise in hard rock actually is mostly out of Australia. And if I were to advance our projects in Manitoba, I would bring Australian expertise in. It may cost me a little more, but again, they figured it all out. They know how to mine hard rock and are the best in the world at doing it. And so, I think a lot of juniors will take a geologist, who has expertise in maybe even copper, gold, or nickel, or whatever it may be, and try to apply it to a lithium brine project or even a clay project. And that may work, but our goal here is to find people that have expertise in a particular area and apply them to our projects. As part of that, we may ultimately decide to separate these projects out into a Canadian entity, a U.S. entity. Again, it's not my vision right now to do that, but it may make sense if we have a joint venture partner that comes in and wants to advance a hard rock project in Canada. That may be something that makes sense where we separate out our U.S. operation, our Canadian operation. I mean, that isn't, again, something that I've considered, but again, depending upon how we advance these, that's something that may be a possibility down the road. And really, it's up to my advisors as well as our core investors and our board to make a decision on that. And the first step here is to get drilling, which we already have started, and make a discovery and confirm what we believe is there, and turn these projects into world-class lithium projects.
Okay, and speaking of drilling, you recently started drilling at Clayton Valley, next door to the USA's only source of domestic lithium production. So, tell us about the targets. What is it that you're trying to hit here? And do these targets look like what you might see at Silver Peak, or do they look a little different?
Well, no, I mean, from a geophysics standpoint, we certainly we've done 2 phases of it, and we have what we believe are great targets. Lithium and in brine can come in multiple layers. It can come in gravels. It can come in there's movement in it. It's not like a one pocket that you're drilling into. It's layered. And so as a result, we drill a core hole, which maybe some investors don't know, is where you first drill a core hole, and then you actually go back in and drill a wider hole with a sleeve. And much like you're drilling an oil and gas well or a geothermal well, first you're testing the rock and the core. You're testing to see what you're seeing in that sand and clay and rock. What other elements that you're coming across, and then ultimately you're testing the aquifer. You're testing the water and brine in that phase 1A and phase 1B program that we're doing. As part of that, water is important. Not only did we go with a notice of intent with the BLM on our drill program and get approval to obviously put in a small road and our drill pads and ultimately drill there, we needed to get a permit that related to our water usage. And so that was something that we secured with the Nevada Department of Minerals a few weeks back. And as a result, it means that we can utilize water as part of our drilling program. And ultimately that would suffice if we were to put let's say a direct lithium extraction pilot plant at our facility down the road. So, there are a number of things that you have to do differently with brine than you would if you were obviously working on a hard rock project.
Okay. And, Albemarle next door, this is a $25-30 billion market cap company, and they're looking to double their domestic lithium production. So, is there any reason that they didn't jump on this before you guys, given the closeology? Surely they must have known about it.
Well, it's interesting, when, majors tend to move, in my experience, a little slower on what their plans are. There's many committees and decisions that are involved. And a lot of the ground surrounding Albemarle was tied up and secured by other parties, 8, 10, 12, 15 years ago, or even longer, and has been held for a long period of time. And I think if Albemarle were to look back, and I can't speak for them, but if they were to look back 12, 15 years ago, lithium was at a different stage of development and pricing, and that company would have been at a different stage. So, the reality is there's only so much land that majors and mid-sized companies and juniors end up, there's a cost to holding ground. There's annual fees that are paid. There's obviously questions about prospectivity and those kind of things too. I mean, those things are all considered, but a lot of the ground, and certainly the ground that we hold, was held privately for close to a decade. So it wasn't ground that Albemarle could have gone after unless they bought it out over the last while. With the recent increase in price in the commodity, it's very difficult to find out what their strategy is. They want to increase domestic production. Is it a wait and see attitude? In my experience, most major companies want to wait until projects have been de-risked before they step in and get involved in some way. So our goal here is to make a discovery. Economic grade is what we're searching for. That'll be the test here. Is the lithium at our site of economic grade, and ultimately, hopefully, can deliver a PEA down the road. Again, time will tell on that. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us, but we're excited about that prospect.
Okay, and say you don't hit here, you don't make an economic discovery with the first hole. Do you think that you'll go and poke another hole, or do you think you'll call it quits early and move on to the next project?
That's something that we'll have to evaluate. Our intention probably would be to go in and drill a second hole. We've got the capital to do that. Again, we don't have any results back yet. It really depends on what we're seeing through this first hole. We'll evaluate that with my team and then make a decision as to what we're going to do next. But without having that information, my instincts would be that we would be drilling a second hole at Clayton Valley.
Okay, and moving on to Fish Lake, you mentioned that there's quite a bit of nearby activity. Can you list some of the other players that are nearby?
There's a company that's private called Luna Lithium that has recently been active there. I haven't had an update recently. I know that there's been a fair bit of claim staking in the area. We've been seeing more people on the ground, actually, which is a sign that things are ongoing. There aren't a lot of publicly traded companies that currently have claims in the area, but there's been a lot of people on the ground active. So we'll see as those areas get registered. There's been a lot of private holders of that ground for a while. We're seeing more geophysics being done in the area, more ground sampling. So, we're keeping a close eye on that area as it develops. And certainly we'd like to get more active over the next few months as well and ultimately make a drill decision.
Is this where Ioneer is?
So Ioneer would be they would be in that area as well. They're slightly to the west of us.
Okay, so talking about Nevada now, especially in Clayton Valley, water rights are tough to come by. Have you begun evaluating your options for that?
We have. Obviously, that's a long-term goal, is to secure water rights. Albemarle has a fairly large position on water in the area. It's something that they've had for many years. There was a court ruling a number of years ago that they actually have more water rights than they deserve or should have, considering that there are other companies in the area. It's our belief that Albemarle will have to give up some of those water rights for other juniors and mid-sized companies that are in the area. Again, that was a court ruling a number of years ago. We're seeing a number of companies now acquire water rights or are in the process of securing them. And that certainly is something, now that we have an interim solution for water rights, certainly one of the milestones that I would like to achieve as we hopefully make a discovery is to secure long-term water rights there over the next 12 to 24 months.
Okay. And I guess we're got lots of good questions here. So You started off in Nevada, then you entered Manitoba. Did you enter Manitoba because you liked the jurisdiction, or were you more so looking at getting some exposure to hard rock lithium sources and Manitoba just happened to have it?
We weren't specifically going after hard rock. It wasn't that we hadn't narrowed it down to hard rock, but what we were looking at is spent a lot of time poring over historical records in a number of states, and certainly in Canada, including Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba. And again, we started to hone in on, in particular, the area surrounding the Tanko mine, which was an existing mine for lithium and cesium and tantalum in production. And so it was us sort of narrowing our focus as to where we felt we could enter in a cost-effective way. And we had boots on the ground there after 3 months of research, and we knew where we wanted to acquire ground. And fortunately, that ground was open. It was not staked, and yet we're a kilometer and a half south of the Tanko mine. So we were one of the first companies last year, at the end of the summer, to have boots on the ground there after fire season and secure that ground. Subsequent in that, we saw more institutional investment in the area. MRL invested in the area. We saw a bit of a frenzy in the area in securing ground, and obviously there's been more drilling there. So there's absolutely no way I could secure that ground today, and we were fortunate to get in there, and our timing was very good. But we'd done our homework, and as a result, we're able to secure these 2 projects at a relatively low cost. We own them 100%. There's no, although we have a royalty on them that's now owned by Lithium Royalty Corporation, which is one of our financial partners, our future is in our hands as to what we want to do. So, we like it from a geology standpoint. We like it from a jurisdictional standpoint. With battery factories being built in Western Ontario, you're not that far away from southeastern Manitoba. Tanko is expanding their production facility there. They're putting in permits to upgrade that facility. They've already made a statement. It was an article written in the Northern Miner recently that they would like to supply lithium to the battery factories in Western Ontario. So, that's a statement they've come out with. Time will tell whether that's in fact what they do. So, I do believe that throughout that southeastern region, we're going to see more activity. In central Manitoba, you've seen a lot more activity happening as well from a lithium standpoint. Snow Lake went public on NASDAQ this year. There's a number of other companies that are active there. So I really believe we're going to see more news out of Manitoba and headlines and hopefully discoveries.
Right, and you kind of mentioned it there a bit, but you said that there's a royalty on these claims, and I know you guys had a nice raise with LRC and Warta. So can you just briefly touch on this royalty? How much is it? Is it an NSR? Is it a GOR? How much money did you get out of this?
So, at the time, we had just secured our ground in Manitoba, and I ended up getting in discussions with LRC and was fortunate that they believed in what we're doing. They had recently visited Manitoba and, in fact, had become highly interested in companies that were active there. And so as part of that financing package that we put together in late January of this year and ultimately closed in early March, it was a royalty that they paid on Manitoba and an equity financing as well. So it was $650,000 US for a 2% NSR. The reasons why we like that, it was non-dilutive for our shareholders. Again, these are early stage projects and came as a package in them becoming really a financial partner for us. They've subsequently added to their position and participated in the financing that I closed about 2 weeks ago in a very difficult market. And I believe we'll continue to write checks over time as we deliver. So, part of my thinking in that was that the royalty was going to be a non-dilutive way to attract capital. At the time, I had about $3.5 million in the bank. And so, again, for me to meet my requirements to drill in Manitoba and ultimately advanced Nevada, it made sense to do this. And I had approval from my board.
Okay. And, we're 50 minutes in here, so we'll try and wrap it up. But, with all this cash, behind you, when's the next time you're looking to raise money? And, can we expect some M&A this year? Any hints as to what you're looking at and where, if so?
You're right. We are in good shape cash wise. I will deploy a few $1 million into Nevada with our Clayton Valley program and upcoming in Fish Lake. Again, I'll make a drilling decision there in Fish Lake at the end of the summer, and that certainly will increase our use of proceeds if we do proceed. And then we've got extensive exploration happening in Manitoba with this spring program, and now ending up potentially drilling in the fall. But it does leave us with some cash left over based on those estimated costs. I do find that it's easier to raise capital when you have capital. The biggest mistake of a lot of juniors is they wait till they're down to a couple $100,000 in the bank and then are trying to raise capital and struggle to do that. We also know that windows open and close when it comes to raising capital. So, assuming we can meet some very positive milestones this year, I would expect to raise additional capital, hopefully at a higher valuation, sometime in late fall or early 2023. Hopefully a larger round based on obviously meeting some milestones and advancing ACME, in the near term, which I think is possible. The other thing is, as a result of having this capital, I do have access to possible joint ventures. We are evaluating other project areas. Again, I had a geo with boots on the ground in another region right now evaluating an area. So, there are other, although we have our hands full with 4 projects, if the right project came along that we could enter into, I would certainly consider it. And then would consider raising additional capital based on maybe a strategic acquisition of something more advanced too. I mean, that always is a possibility. But, we've got our hands full. We're in good shape. I'm excited about our projects, and we're in good shape from a cash standpoint, and we'll deploy it effectively and hopefully have some good results for our shareholders over the course of 2022.
Yeah, and with that, I think that's a good place to end it, Steve. There's clearly a lot to look forward here. You got drilling in Clayton Valley happening right now, some geophysics at Fish Lake, drilling happening later in Manitoba, maybe some acquisitions on the horizon here, and let me know if I'm missing anything here. But it sounds like you guys have your hands busy, which is great. So thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure hosting you.
Great. Well, thank you, Kobe, for having me today. And thanks to everyone that joined this webinar, and appreciate the time.
Yeah. And, if you want to learn our thoughts on ACME as well as other companies that we watch, we do publish all of our research on our website free of charge. And just a reminder that our next webinar will take place on June 16th when Timothy Lee sits down with Brenforth Resources. Again, that's June 16th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.